Welcome to Retirement in Focus with Chris Mediate. Chris helps guide local families on the path toward a successful retirement. Chris and the team at Mediate Financial will help you learn about strategies for creating income in retirement, managing your wealth, and minimizing taxes. Welcome to Retirement in Focus with Chris Mediate.
Inflation is a major concern for people preparing for retirement. Inflation never sleeps, it just keeps going, and it can make it more difficult for you to be able to afford your way of life in the future. No matter how much or how little you have, inflation impacts everyone. On the show today, we'll tell you why you shouldn't ignore inflation and how to combat it and live the retirement you've worked so hard for. Welcome everyone, I'm Amy Sharp, joined by Chris Mediate, founder of Mediate Financial, located right here in Youngstown, Ohio. And it is great to be back with you, Chris. How are you?
I'm well, how about you?
I'm good. I'm excited about this. Well, you know, how can you get excited about inflation? But it's always good. It's here to stay, and that's why it's important that we stay on top of it.
That's right.
And let's get right to it. I think because, of course, we're focusing on retirees here.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times people think, you know, maybe I get to this stage of life, I won't have to worry about these things. But you say maybe it's going to hit retirees pretty hard.
Well, especially now. I mean, look what we just went through over the past year. Prices going up. You know, go to the grocery store. We see how much things are costing. Everything is more. Movie theaters, anything. You mean gas, okay? So when we're on fixed incomes and we're retirees or we're trying to do this, you have to realize now all of a sudden inflation is playing a major role. We might not have had to worry about it so much 10 years ago. The plan you should always account for it. But guess what, Amy? We are seeing it more and more today, and it is affecting retirees more than ever.
A lot of people may think, you know, Social Security, I get that COLA, that cost of living adjustment. Right. Doesn't that offset inflation at all? Can't it help a little bit?
Ask them. I mean, anybody that I talk to, clients that I talk to, we realize, hey, look, that cost of living adjustment has been a great help. But remember, that's only part of the income. And so we got to remember, what does Social Security do for us? How much of our budget is Social Security actually covering? So if it's only covering part of our living expenses, Amy, and that's the only place we're getting a cost of living adjustment, we realize that that's a problem, right? So now, how are we going to combat that? So it's just not enough. And we realize that financial plans, okay, anything that you have really should be taking inflation into account.
Okay, my lifestyle in retirement. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different goal, dream of how they want to live out those years. Right. You know, go to the golf course, go on trips, things like that. How does inflation impact that? Because, you set your plan sometimes 20 years ahead of that time.
You do. And, that's what I tell everybody. I say, look, I always call it, what's your number? And that number usually is your monthly income, right? And that's dictated by your lifestyle. So you said that right. You teed it up. But here's the thing. Yes, you have to plan for it. Yes, you're doing it. But if you are not building a financial plan around the fact that you're going to want to do more, you're going to want to be able to keep up with what expenses are coming your way. So you need to have that extra, whatever you're doing with your savings, automatically accounting for inflation. So when we build an income plan for you, that's something our office does do. It's one of the first things we do. We want to show you exactly where your money is coming from so that you could say, hey, part of my plan is already accounting for inflation, and that's really important to have that built in.
So you're sitting down with your clients and it's different. Every single conversation is different. It's not like they're coming in and getting this cookie cutter plan.
No, absolutely. It's about you. It's about your lifestyle. You're telling me what it is you want. I say money to live, money to have a life. Money to live is covering your day-to-day expenses. Money to have a life is what you like to do. So we want to be able to build that in your plan.
I like that. Money to have a life. Okay, so inflation, it's on the rise. It's not going away. We've established that. We have to be able to prepare for it, include it, in our purchasing power, if you will, down the road. How do we do that?
So in your financial plan, right? And that's number one to start. Have a solid foundation of an income plan. So there's things additional than Social Security. We realize Social Security is not the only thing we're living on today, right? So we've got to be able to have our financial plan, our money starting to account for it. First thing we want to do is build that income plan, okay? And it should be accounting for inflation.
Yeah. Anything else we need to be keeping in mind? I know that this is a topic that will continue throughout the show, but I think, first thing that you would say to someone if they say, I've already got my plan in place, I don't need to worry about inflation. What's that conversation look like?
Do you? Right? Show me. And when I tell somebody I don't want to see a bunch of statements, right? Because that's what most people do. I say, what's your plan? And most people will hand me a bunch of statements and they'll say, that's my financial plan. And I say, do you know exactly where your money is coming from? So do you really know that inflation is being covered in your financial plan? Can you truly answer that? And if they can't answer that, that's my job to be able to teach them how to use that pile of statements in order to create an income plan, in order to be able to answer the inflation question 100%.
Yeah, 100%. And being a DIYer, a lot of times people think, I can do this myself. I did a great budget, but all of a sudden you get to retirement. You get to topics like this, it's not so easy.
No, it's not at all. And that's the thing. We've seen it more and more and more. And when people are on fixed incomes or they think they've done it right, I want to have them prove it to me. And that's usually going through an income plan and actually being able to show where that's coming from.
All right, great insight as always. Thank you so much, Chris. Inflation is on the rise and it could spell trouble for your retirement. How can you keep it from impacting your purchasing power in retirement? Chris explains next.
Everybody needs a plan. If Carol's ever going to retire, she needs a plan. So does Bob. Jim and Susan, they need a plan. And Puddles over there, yeah, he's gonna need a plan too. You? Yeah, you probably need a plan. Whoever you are, whatever you do, you can use a plan for retirement. We can help.
You have a club for every scenario. A driver for the long holes. Wedges to get you over the hazards. And a putter for when you need a touch of finesse. What about your retirement? Will you have enough to play the back nine? Call to set your 15-minute phone visit today and let's find out. Get a second set of eyes on your retirement plan.
And welcome back, everyone. We've continued to see record high inflation in recent months, and it is cause for concern for many people preparing for retirement. Chris is here with me once again. It is clear inflation is real. It could potentially stand in the way of our retirement dreams. And there really has got to be a way to plan for this. And I think we can't reiterate this enough. It really does start with that plan because a lot of times our dreams and goals easily can get ahead of ourselves sometimes.
That's right.
If we don't sit and pause for a minute.
And you're right. So, what brings all that together is having a plan. And we say how simple that is, but most people don't, right? People don't have this written out. And if inflation is one of the concerns that you think, look, is that going to impact what I'm doing 10 years from now? Don't I want to do that? And that's what I tell people when they come into my office. My job is to help you plan 10, 20 years down the road. Most people think today, right? So if inflation's a concern, we want to look, let's get a financial plan together that's going to have a true income plan that says, look, I know exactly where my money is going to come from. And then we're going to have a second part that's going to say, look, if inflation is a concern or we know we have to plan for inflation, I want to know that my financial plan has been tested to handle those raises. And so you have to begin with a financial plan in order to do that. Because if you're concerned, Amy, don't you want something that says, yep, I know I got that covered?
Yeah. You want your shoulders to be able to relax a little bit. Yeah. You think about during our working years, we get the raises. Well, first of all, we get the paycheck. We get the raises, we get the bonuses in our working years. And so that kind of helps give us a little boost throughout those years. During retirement, we aren't getting that. How do we offset that we are no longer getting to help with the inflation issue?
So again, let's just keep going back to this. You're creating your paycheck. And I tell people, when you are focused so much on net worth, and we're focused so much on net worth, and that's great because you want to have ample savings. The problem is, do I know how to use it? Okay? So when we come back and somebody's saying, I can overcome this while I'm working, and it's, I can work harder. Once we retire, we're not doing that. We always say, look, my income is what it's going to be. My savings, more than likely, is what it's going to be. And I know most people, when they retire, don't want to go back to work. We hope not, okay,
not.
Right? Hope not. So again, this is just going to come back to having your plan account for everything that it is you want to do. Remember, this is your dream, this is your life, And you want to specify exactly knowing your number, being able to know how much you're going to need to live and how much you want to do for fun, the things that you like to do, those dreams that you want to do. So again, coming back to having a true financial plan, which is what we do in our office. So when people come in, that's one of the first questions I want to know. What's your number? What is your dream? What do you want to live in? And then it's my job to build a plan to help you accomplish that.
There has got to be someone out there right now saying, is there any income source out there, any at all, that are inflation proof?
So yes, there is, and again, it's coming back to, do we want to talk about guaranteed sources of income? Do I want to be able to create a financial plan that says, are there those investments? And that's why I tell people, look, when we're building a plan, sometimes it's not all about the investment, it's about building it in. So do I want to have guaranteed source income? Do I want to know that I have also income from other assets that are going to be able to create that inflation proof? So that they are out there. And that's where I tell people, look, that's where you want to come in and talk. If that's a question that you're concerned with, that maybe you don't know the answer, maybe that's why you want to come in and talk to somebody like myself so that we can address the concern. Remember, my job, if you have a question, guess what my job is, Amy?
Answer that question.
I got to give you an answer. Absolutely.
Find it out.
Yes.
And speaking of that, Chris, I think that leads to my next question. Find that person to help you. How do you find the right help? What's the way, the questions to ask to make sure that I'm with the right guidance, I'm getting the trusted advice that I need, so that my plan will help me throughout inflation?
So somebody that, remember, there's I always say there's different types of advisors out there, okay? There's advisors that manage your investments. And that's always called those, managing your statement, right? Because the only type of advice, and that's no knock, if that's something you're looking for, that's fine. They just manage, they're going to go over your statement. Or are you looking for an advisor that is managing your life? Okay. And so those are big things, is what am I getting out of that advisor? And those are things. Are you creating an income plan? Are you creating an investment plan? Are you creating where I know risk reward? I know what my risk is. Am I handling a legacy? Am I handling what would happen if the market corrects? I mean, those are questions that you should be asking. How do you go about doing this? And is there a plan that I can see in writing? And that, I think, is one of the first steps that you want to do. And that's something we do in our office.
Is there a checklist out there? I love a checklist. Is there a checklist that I would have that I could take and say, this is what I need?
There's always a checklist.
There's a checklist everywhere.
We tell, I mean, there are checklists. I mean, we do give some checklists away, and that's something that, again, you could request from our office, just to say, what questions do I ask an advisor? And that's one of the big things, is we want people to be loaded with questions, because again, we're just going to pivot back. The more questions that you ask, the better that I know that you're trying to learn. The more vetted you are into the financial plan, the more we know, right? The more we stick to it.
You're up for that challenge, right?
Always.
You mentioned something earlier about living longer. It could be with these individuals 10, 15, 20, 30 plus years. Yeah. We are living longer. That's such great news. But our income has to last. It's scary as well. Our income has to last. Are people aware of that when they come into you, is what I'm trying to get to?
You hear that question a lot, Amy, and I think people sometimes are they think we're immortal, like, wow, it's not going to happen, maybe, or are we concerned with how long we're going to live? Or you might even hear the reverse. Some people, I'm not going to be around that long, or I'm going to spend more money, quicker in my shorter time because I'm not going to need as much. And a lot of that is not true, okay?
Well, my relatives only lived this long, so
that's what they're doing. But you have to plan. I mean, today, we're working, and we're retired, almost as long as we are working today. So your financial plan has to be built for longevity. And that's sometimes the thing, is somebody might not know that direct answer. Don't you want to know your money's going to last as long as you are alive?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's something that you want to get out of your financial plan, that says, look, do I have longevity covered?
Thank you so much, Chris. Great insight as always. And up next, Chris has an economic lesson for you. Inflation versus shrinkflation. Stay tuned for our Retirement Clear View.
How much do you have saved for retirement? Now, cut that number in half. That's the impact inflation could have. Think about what that could do to your lifestyle and spending power in retirement. Inflation is on the rise. How can you protect your retirement dreams? Start by getting this free guide to understand inflation and the 5 easy steps you can take to help keep it from downgrading your retirement. You can't stop inflation, but if you act now, you may be able to minimize its impact on your retirement. Get your free copy now.
You've heard of inflation, but shrinkflation? Chris explains where this can impact us all. Chris?
Thanks, Amy. Now for a retirement clear view. Let's talk a little bit about inflation, shrinkflation. As we learned this and we're seeing it more and more, just go to the grocery store, we notice it more and more today. Go pump gas. So inflation has become a topic that I'm hearing in my office time and time again. And I guess the question always is, how do we plan for it? What do we do? And we're also seeing another topic, as Amy had alluded to, shrinkflation. So when we talk about what's the differences, we hear them. Inflation, shrinkflation, what do they mean? Well, I think inflation is pretty self-explanatory, Rod. It's when things are going up, the cost of it is going up over time. And I think we started to notice that more now in the last year and a half than we did over the last 10 years. I have clients come into my office all the time saying, hey, look, I've noticed my purchasing power change. So, what am I going to do about it? And I think that's really what we want to learn is, how do I figure out how to handle inflation, or how do I deal with shrinkflation as part of my overall financial plan? So when we look at those differences, what's shrinkflation? Again, let's go to the grocery store. Let's buy a bag of potato chips. Let's buy any other type of good and realize that the price is exactly the same, but our quantity decreases. We're actually getting less for our dollar. And when we start to notice as our dollar, the cost of everything going up, and then we start to realize that we're not getting so much. So we have to buy more and more in order to get the same quantity. But either way, what is starting to happen is our dollar is losing that purchasing power. And I think we've started to notice that again, more and more. So how exactly do you handle this type of situation as inflation gets tighter and tighter? And how do we bring this back into our financial plans? And basically, we know we need to adjust our income planning. So when we talk about setting a good financial plan, one of the key sources, especially we do in our office when someone comes in, is we want to first set an income plan. So when that's one of the first steps we do, because remember, when we have saved all this money, we want to be able to say, okay, now I've saved this. What do I do with it? What does this money mean to me? How do I create this net worth in order to make it work for me better? And that's where your income plan is going to come into play. So one of the first foundational things you want to do here, right, is how am I offsetting if inflation is a concern? One, we want to start with a foundation. And that foundation, as I talked about earlier, is finding out what money in our lifestyle are we going to need, right? So what do we want to pay our bills? So I always call that money to live. We want to have our core expenses. We want to know where exactly am I getting my money from. Second of all, we want to have money to have a life, right? That's the things that we like to do, whether that's a hobby, whether that's going out to dinner. Those are things that, again, want to be part of our core. I always say, what's your number? And that's what I'm looking for. It's not really net worth, it's that number. So if we know we're going to start creating that in a balanced income plan, how do I learn to adjust my plan for inflation? Because we've just learned costs of goods are going up. So I ask many, do you want your income staying the same and then having your lifestyle change? Meaning you're going to have to start cutting back on doing the things that you love to do. How come? Is because maybe you haven't correctly planned for it. And that's why when I say you want to have a really good, solid foundation to start with, and then you want to have your plan or your income plan built around it. And remember, this has got to connect with your investment plan, because your investment plan is what you're putting together in addition to your income plan in order to, one, show where the income is going to come from, which is important. Two, I always call it our second bucket. It's our what if bucket, our contingent bucket. And that means, how do I handle things that are going to come my way? And guess what is a what if? It's inflation. It's loss of my purchasing power. Don't we all want to know where our money is coming from? So when we're looking at a good, sound financial plan, let's be realistic. You want to be able to say, okay, what if this happens? As I point out, it's my job to look at something 10 years from now and be able to say, look, you got it covered. And that's what we want to do. If something happens like inflation, our medical costs are going up because of inflation, right? Our prescription costs, we realize that. Or we're not getting quite as much for our dollar. We want to have something that is there and ready. You want to be able to answer that question. Imagine if you're going on a cruise or you're going away or you're doing something and all you're doing is consistently looking at your bank account, or you're asking yourself these questions of why, what do I do, what do I do to handle this? Am I going to be able to do that? And it all starts with a really solid foundation of an income plan. And you should be talking, whether you're with another advisor, you're talking to an advisor, whether you're doing it yourself, you should be looking at something that will be able to say and answer inflation. Is my plan having something that is going to rise with me? If I know my costs are increasing by 3 to 4 to 5%, is my financial plan already established to be able to answer that question? And I think that's one of the biggest things that I see when people come into my office and they're nervous or they're scared. It's because they can't answer that question. And remember, the whole foundation of why you've saved and why you have done things and why you've put money aside is you want to live that retirement of your dreams. And you don't want something that we've just learned like inflation or shrinkflation of getting something less, more quantity, to impact that financial plan. So you want to be able to have an adjusted income plan that says, look, I know if inflation starts rearing its ugly head and it continues to get worse, and let's hope like not 1970-ish type of inflation, but that we have an exact plan that says, look, I know how to answer that question. And I think that's really, really key is, again, my job is to make sure that you have a question, I'm giving you an answer, and our role is to make sure that you live the life that you want. So again, thanks, Amy, and that's our Retirement Clearview.
Thanks, Chris. Up next, get answers to your retirement questions in our Q&A segment. Stay tuned.
Our generation has always believed that a hard day's work is its own reward. So, for some of us, it's hard to turn off that work switch come retirement. But imagine what can happen when that work switch becomes a life switch. Then you realize that every day in retirement is its own reward. We can help you flip the switch to make work days become life days.
Time now to get to your questions. Chris, are you ready for this?
You bet, let's go.
Okay, always a fun segment. This one is from Chuck in Canfield. I'm worried about taxes when I retire. I've heard you mention using life insurance for tax-free income in retirement, but does that really work?
Chuck, yes, it does really work. Again, tax diversification is really key in a financial plan. So you have your taxable accounts, you have your tax deferred accounts, and you have your tax-free accounts. Okay, so when we mention life insurance in as far as tax-free in retirement, okay, be very careful, right? Because it's got to be for the right person and the right situation. That's why you want to make sure you're talking to somebody that gets that, okay? Because it's not just, hey, let's buy life insurance. It's got to fit as part of a diversified plan. And again, it's part of that tax diversification plan, but it's got to be the right fit. But yes, it can work in the right situation. It can be a tax-free distribution if you set it up properly. That's the key, Chuck. Make sure that it is set up properly.
Okay, great information. And here's one from Jim in Poland. My wife recently passed away, and I'm wondering if I need to think about being more conservative with my money. How do I figure out if there are better places for my money that keeps me from taking too much risk?
Wow, that's a tough situation there. Sorry to hear that. So again, conservative, that's a subjective question, okay? Because my definition of conservative could be different than his, okay? So again, part of a diversified portfolio, part of a financial plan should handle whether or not you're conservative. So again, that's going through a proper risk analysis, so make sure we're doing that. But are there places that you can do it? Yes, there are, okay? You just want to make sure that, again, you're building that as part of your overall financial plan. So everybody can have conservative types of investments, but again, it's got to fit, okay? That's really key. It has to fit for what it is that you're trying to do. So you can match money with your goal. So then I would come back and say, what is your goal? What are we trying to do? So again, make sure to answer that question. You want to make sure that you're going through an entire plan. Again, if you're sitting with somebody like myself, we're going to get out what are we trying to accomplish? And then we can determine whether or not conservative is appropriate for that particular goal. Okay.
This question is from Cheryl in Warren. My husband and I would like to retire in the next 5 years, but aren't sure when is the best time to start taking our Social Security. Can you help with that?
Yes, Cheryl, I can help with that. Social Security is one of the bigger questions that we have. And unfortunately, what most people think is the first thing that they do when they retire is to go right down and they're going to immediately turn Social Security on. There is more to claiming Social Security than we think, Amy, okay? And that's why for Cheryl, again, you're gonna wanna get a proper Social Security analysis because you're gonna wanna be looking at things. If I take it early, how does it affect one of my spouses, you know? Because remember, in a Social Security situation, when one of us passes, the surviving spouse usually gets the higher of the two Social Securities. So again, when I claim matters. How does Social Security fit into my financial plan? So those are things that we do in our office. Is one of the first steps of a proper income plan is addressing Social Security as part of our overall plan. And then that will help you determine when you should be able to take Social Security. So it's not as easy as we think. It's got to be part of your overall financial plan. And so you're going to want to get an analysis to be able to do that for sure.
There's just a few questions to answer when it comes to Social Security.
There's a
right?
lot. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot more than I think people
Right.
think about. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here is another question from Rebecca in North Lima. I watch your show and I hear you talk about having more than one place to get income from in retirement. What do you recommend?
Wow, Rebecca, that's, so when I say more than one source, it's key to know where your money is coming from. Because if we're using our entire portfolio to generate our income, okay, what happens if I need money? What happens if there's a situation where I have a health event? What happens if the stock market crashes? You know, how do I answer those questions? So that's why I always say, again, you want to have a diverse way that you're getting your income from, because if you have it on one source, then guess what happens? We can't answer that question. So part of a good foundational financial plan, income plan, investment plan will show you exactly where your money's coming from. And that's why I say there are multiple ways to be able to do that, multiple sources. And again, we always say you want to tie the income to the goal of which we're trying to receive. And then we want to make sure that we're planning for the future. That's why a good financial plan accounts for what we're going to need to get as far as income maybe 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, and you want to be diversified in the income sources you have.
Wow, great insight as always. Lots of good questions. We appreciate
Great
those.
questions.
Thank you so much, Chris. And if you have a question, submit it and we may just answer it on a future show. And if you want to know how to generate lifetime income, reduce your tax bill, and maintain your lifestyle in retirement, reach out now to start planning for your ideal retirement. For Chris and the team at Mediate Financial, I'm Amy Sharp, wishing you a healthy and happy journey to and through retirement.